1. Let me start out by saying that I am a 45-year-old male. I am from Los Angeles, California. In the late 70s, when I was in elementary school, we lived in a small house in south central LA. A family of 5, a younger sister and 1 older brother. My dad worked about 45 minutes away in a rim factory in Wilmington, California. He was looking for a place for us closer to his job. But he found this house at a real steal. He paid only $200 a month for 2 bedrooms and a small backyard. We were excited. Being just 4 years in the country from Mexico, we now had a real house, even though we were just renting. Nothing really happened the first week, but I remember the night like it was yesterday when everything hit the fan. We went out to a drive-in movie. When we got back, we walked up to the porch, and my dad said to us in Spanish, "Wait here." He opened the front door and walked in. After what seemed to be forever, but maybe 2 minutes, he came out and said, "I think we have been robbed." Closer inspection, we found out nothing had been stolen, no forced entry, just that a lot of our stuff had been thrown around. After about 10 minutes cleaning up the house, the lights went out. My dad went to check the fuse box outside and ran back inside because he heard us yelling and screaming. The radio turned on and someone was speaking to us in English. We, being new to the USA, didn't understand what this man on the radio was saying. So my dad unplugged it. Then the lights came back on. All of a sudden, dishes in the sink started rattling around. We went and nothing was moving, but the noise was there. We went to sleep that night scared out of our minds. My dad doesn't believe in all the hocus pocus, so he just brushed it off and locked up everything. My brother and me had a room to ourselves, and the other bedroom was full of boxes, so my parents and sister slept in the living room for the time being. Well, later that same night, when everyone is asleep, I sat up and was real thirsty. Not wanting to go to the kitchen in the dark, I lay back down, trying to sleep it off. All of a sudden I felt something or someone sit down at my feet on the bed. I sat up and saw a man smiling at me. Not knowing who it was, I sat up and asked him in Spanish, "Can you take me to get a drink of water?" Then all hell broke loose. My mom let out a scream that could have broke all the windows. My hand dropped down, my dad turned the lights on, and I had my hands on my ears because of my mom screaming. At this time, dogs are barking. I can hear people yelling back towards our house. My dad said to me, "Why am I trying to scare my mom?" My mom was hysterical. She said to my dad, "I saw a shadow, then it vanished when the lights came on." And when I told my mom that it was the man trying to get me some water, she screamed out again and said to shut up already. Then she grabbed me and started massaging my head. Mexican women, for some reason or other, do this when a child gets injured or scared. Don't ask me why, but just ask anyone who has a family member or friends that are Mexican. As my dad checked the house and went outside to check, my mom couldn't stop crying. My dad came back and said, "That's odd. Everything seems to be just the way I left it." He asked, "What did the man look like? Did he say anything to me?" I said, "He's white, friendly, and didn't say a word, he just smiled." In the background I could hear my mom reciting the Our Father. We were brought up in the Catholic Church. Just recently, 10 years ago, I gave my life to the Lord, and I'm now a devout Christian. I'm writing this email to let your listeners know that these things do occur, and they are very demonic, so be careful. 2. Back in 2012, I used to work a second side job at this dive bar in Maryland. There would be the occasional fights, verbal and physical, but we always seemed to calm the situation. However, there was this one individual who would regularly come in. First off, let me mention that he was a tattoo artist who worked just down the block from this bar. And a few days he would come in before his shift and take a couple of shots and have a couple of beers. I don't know how that shit panned out. So, Tattoo Dude would almost always start shit with someone, whether it was a customer or a worker. I don't know why my boss let him in all the time. Well, after about 3 years of working there, I made enough money to move out, so I resigned. It was only 2 days, count 'em, 2 freaking days, after I left the company when I get a text from one of the bartenders telling me to look up this news article. I kid you not. The tattoo guy finally took his fights too far and stabbed a dishwasher to death right in the middle of that bar. Apparently, they both started arguing about something stupid. My boss tried to calm them down and suggested they take the argument outside. They both were having their cigarettes and it seemed to die down a bit. They came back into the bar where the drunk dishwasher, oh, did I mention we could drink on the job? Well, he got a little too comfortable and wrapped his arm around the tattoo artist's shoulder. People believed it was the dishwasher sort of meaning to end the fight. You know, like, hug it out or something. However, Tattoo Asshole Dude took it the wrong way and literally stabbed him multiple times to death. He died in that bar before paramedics came. I never got into a fight with that guy. But shit, did I quit at the right time or what? He was sentenced to life. I bet he'll be doing prison tattoos for some of his new friends now. 3. Right now I am an 18-year-old male, honestly anorexic and tall, lanky, and still to this day shit's happening that cannot be explained. Little bit more of a backstory before I get to it. My mom passed away when I was 7 years old, and I greatly think this has something to do with my experiences. So my first experience was at my friend's house while I was 13. We stayed up all night on the weekend doing those stupid Facebook quizzes. You know what I mean. Well, he'd go first, then I would, and we got onto one that really interested us. Which ghost follows you? Yeah, I get it. We were stupid. And children. What's my excuse now? Well, the quiz gave him a stupid-ass ghost from a famous movie. I don't remember the name, but I remember the famous quote, "I see dead people." Yeah, that movie. Well, we laughed and thought it was just a fluke, and then I went. It told me that the ghost that followed me was a little girl stuck in a doll, and she would be confined to having to stay on the porch and just view me. Me and my friend didn't laugh this time. As we looked to our left and out the window to the porch, his porch was filled with dolls because of his little sister. We kinda tried to laugh, but just couldn't. We just went to bed and forgot about it. Fast forward a few years and I'm now 15 and in grade 8. My room is in the basement of our house, and we had to build a wall for my room and put a light in. Also, the way upstairs was laid out. You'd walk inside the door and have the option to turn right and step up one step and go into the kitchen, or you could walk straight and go downstairs. Now that's clear. Every night when I'd go to sleep after everyone else, I'd hear typing on a keyboard of the computer, which is on the other side of my bedroom wall. And no one would ever be there. I just got used to it and joked, "Hey man, the ghost has to get his porn too." Well, all jokes got thrown out the night I decided to see Paranormal Activity 3 in theaters. Cliché, eh? Well, same shit goes on. I was laying in bed and the typing started. No big deal. Then I could hear a whisper. Slowly it was getting closer and closer. I could then make out my name. Chase. 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 And it got to the foot of my bed and I haven't budged. My bed is in the middle of my wall and I'm facing to the right, laying down on my stomach. The Hollywood Undead poster on the left side of my bed just fell off the wall. I automatically jumped and looked. And I saw a fucking little girl. Then I blinked, and she was gone. She had long brown hair and a white dress, with what I assumed to be blood on it. Any normal person would be freaking out right now, yeah? Well, not me. I literally just said out loud, "Meh," and I shrugged my shoulders and just laid back down. A few months after that, something else rather big happened. This time I was sitting in my room, drawing, and it was about 8. I was home alone. My light in my room would always screw up. I could have the switch off, and my light would turn on, and the opposite. But only when I'm alone in the basement. If someone would step on the landing from the kitchen, or come in the side door, and my light would just go back to whatever it was supposed to be. I also figured out if I jiggled the light itself, then it would go back to what it was supposed to. Only sometimes, though. So I'm just drawing away, and then my light goes off. I said out loud, "Oh, fuck off, I'm trying to draw. I need that." As I stand up to jiggle the light. As I touch the light, I start hearing a tap on my window, which is underneath a deck, so nothing can get to it. Barely even wind. So the tapping is continuous until I get the light back on. And when the light comes on, it stops practically mid-tap. So I take 2 steps to my window, and as I get to it, my light completely blows out, and there is a smack on the window. Again, most people would be shitting bricks. Not me. I just open the window and peek my head out, and you guessed it, I see nothing. But as I close the window, I watched a cut form on the hand I was using. On my middle finger, the cut started at the nail, and as I moved the window, it would go more towards my hand. I honestly didn't think anything of it. And this would be the end of my story, if it wasn't for these new experiences. I now have my own apartment, but with luck, I ended up getting the exact apartment that my great-uncle Kenny died in, because the whole house caught fire. R.I.P. Uncle Kenny. Please don't get mad and start fucking with me more. Well, Uncle Kenny would only fuck with me, especially when my cousin Serena would come over. The one time was weird, because I never got goosebumps, especially when it was Uncle Kenny doing stuff. Her now ex-boyfriend Wes, and then her and me were sitting on the couch taking tokes. And Serena said, "Man, it's so weird being here, walking everywhere that he walked," and continued to say how it scared her. And Wes said stop then. It got quiet. And then Wes said, "Did you hear that? It sounded like the ka-chunk of a wooden spoon being dropped or something." We just looked at him like he was crazy. He said, "No, for real, it sounded like..." And as he was saying that, he pointed to the kitchen where the sound came from. And as he pointed and said, "sounded like," he cued the noise, but louder. So we all heard it. And when I heard it, I got goosebumps. That was the first weird experience here. The other day, after falling asleep while listening to, ironically, a Hellfreezer video, I woke up with a pretty big cut on my left arm near my hand. It starts there and is almost the size of my forearm. Then I'd be watching videos on my PS3 on YouTube, and it would just change. But there wouldn't even be a sound of a video being selected. It would just start. Nah, I might just have to stop watching so much scary shit. And then I wouldn't be so paranoid and relating everything to my ghost. But it's kinda hard after living with her for 5 years. You get used to things moving and going missing, and my auntie blaming me for things I know I didn't do, so she must have. She would laugh as I fall or stub my toe on something. There would be times where she would take my phone out of my hands and throw it across the room. Now keep in mind I'm talking about my ghost, not my girlfriend. Well, I think I'll end there. Save the rest of my experiences for another time. leave you with a little mystery, and wondering what else happened to make it so I got used to my ghost. Oh, wait. Little creepy girl ghost, when will I meet you again? 4. This happened in my brother's room. We slept there now because I was too scared to sleep in my garage anymore, and my friends that stayed over didn't like my room too, because it freaked them out. My friend T was over as well, and this chick I was trying to pick up, May. We were on the floor and my brother on his bed. As soon as we turned the lights off to get ready to sleep, we could see my brother just sitting there, sitting still for ages, not saying a word and not moving at all. We thought nothing much of it, and hugging May we kissed and said goodnight and closed our eyes. After a while, I still hadn't heard him lay down yet. Hadn't heard any screeching the bed makes when there's movement or anything, so me, May and T pretty much all sat up at the same time, looking at Kay's dark silhouette just sitting there, in the dark. So I said, "Lay down, Kay, what are you doing? Go to sleep, man." But no reply. "Kay? Kay, you alright?" "The fuck you doing, man? Lay down and go to sleep." Still no response or reply at this time. May was starting to get scared and asked me to get him to stop. So I started slapping his face, telling him, "You're scaring us, man, stop it. Stop mucking around." After a few slaps, he grabbed my hand before I hit him again, without even looking. Slowly he turned his head and said, with a deep, calm voice, "I'm not mucking around." We all jumped under the blanket and said, "What the fuck, what do we do?" We stayed under the blankets for what seemed like ages. So I took a peek, and he was still sitting there, still staring at us. That was when T got up, turned on the lights and screamed, "Fuck you, Huang! You're after me, leave him alone and come get me." After he said that, my brother lay down and just started crying for a bit, then snapped out of it like nothing happened, looked at us and said, "What? What's wrong? Why are you looking at me for?" Then all of a sudden, T started shaking violently, on and off, tired and out of breath each time, until it stopped. It was like it was trying to possess him, but was unable each time it tried. Maybe because he was wearing a cross, I don't know. But after a bit of that, I started to get pissed and swore at it, saying, "Fuck you, leave us alone, dickhead. What did we do to you?" And I swear I heard him laugh at me like he was mocking me or something. Then T spurted out, "Ha! He's going after her." My sister was sleeping in the next room, so we all ran into her room and woke her up and dragged her out into the lounge room, where we all lit a few incense and prayed to Buddha, which seemed to make it stop, because nothing happened after that. We moved out not long after that too, so I don't know whether anything is still happening there or not. But all I know is that that Huang ghost was and had to have been following T for some reason. Nothing has happened to me since. I am now 34, so I guess I'm good. All I know is that I ain't playing a Ouija board ever again. 5. My shift patterns at work changed, and I found for a while that I had regular days off at the end of the week with most Mondays. This newfound relaxation was good for a few months, but I started to get bored. With my wife at work and kids at school, I had done enough odd jobs around the house, and there is only so many times you can clean a motorcycle, so twiddling my thumbs was not going to be an option. I tried shoot-'em-up games on my son's PlayStation, but even for a weekday, there were kids bunking school, whooping my ass after 5 seconds on whatever game I tried. The reactions and dexterity of a 30-year-old was no match for some console-savvy kid. Then more sedate strategy war games, something where my slow pace was more at home. But alas, there were so many high levels, ever eager to find easy prey on low-level cyber generals, that progress I soon deemed impossible, without spending real cash to buy fake gems to gain better items quickly. So I decided to use my bike to visit old haunts and places of familiarity I knew when growing up. Half-day trips down memory lane, so to speak. Living in the middle of England, getting to any of the places etched in my memory from childhood was easy, usually no more than a 90-minute ride away. Good weather was on my side week after week, and it was pleasant to jog my memory on places that became misty over time. Once I went back to the village I grew up in between the ages of 8 to 14, a quiet place of no more than 4,000 inhabitants in the county of Northamptonshire. For those overseas, it's approximately 100 miles north of London and 30 miles northeast of Stratford-upon-Avon. I even parked my bike close to the house we lived in just so I could take in the scene and let my mind wander back to those childhood days. Strolling through the village, so many memories came back to me, each landmark that would have been semi-forgotten without actually being in the place. Just walking around reminiscing and remembering kind of all day. All the places we used to play and get in trouble, etc. I knew from Facebook that not many of the friends I grew up with still lived there. Far too expensive on the property ladder to live in a picturesque Middle England chocolate box painting quaint village. I was thinking of adjourning to the pub, as you do, when I found myself outside the old coach house, a large pre-Victorian building where 20 years before a friend of mine called James used to live. James and I used to play together a lot, and I had been in the house many times as a youngster, and thought it would be nice to knock on the door just to see if James or his parents were still there, catch up on old times, or even just to see if they remembered me. Gingerly, I thumped the big old oak door, stood back, small delay, and it opened. There stood James's mum, a little smaller and older than I imagined she would be. A brief introduction assured her I wasn't selling anything, and her face lit up as she remembered who I was. Waved me inside. She thought the knock on the door was the window cleaner who was due any moment. Kettle on, and there we stood chatting and laughing in the beautiful old kitchen. Talk centered on our lives and what had been happening and so on, and she was always thought to be an eccentric person when we were younger. Collecting him from Junior in a ball gown, I recall, and would drive a 30-ton lorry on country lanes at breakneck speed on occasion. So yes, a little different, but salt of the earth, kind and friendly. I was leaning on the worktops, and James's mum was sat at the large table putting together a flower display while chatting. The kitchen had 2 doors, both were open, and I could see down the long hall through one and out the pantry and garden through the other. Drinking tea and chatting away for 15 minutes or so, I then noticed a man in black stood at the end of the hall with 2 dogs either side of him. I instantly thought it was James's dad and gave him a small wave. He waved back. "Dad's here," I said. "I doubt it. Most likely the window cleaner," said James's mum. I thought it unusual that the window cleaner would have dogs with him, and James's mum went on to explain how James's dad was in a home with dementia, and had been for over a year when things got too bad at home. She was continuing the sad story when I could see the man in the hall, coming closer, and that the things beside him were not dogs, but what looked like apes, chimpanzees even. They walked in time with him, one each side, as you can picture. I found this most unusual in my gaze, and was fixed on them as they came up the hall. I lost concentration on what James's mum was saying for a moment, and kind of snapped out of it, and attempted to mention if she knew these creatures were in her house. But she was in full flow, recounting the story of her ill husband, and couldn't be interrupted. I tried, but was gestured to wait in her unique style, and on she carried. By now the man was just a couple of steps from the kitchen door, and I put down my tea and stood upright, wanting to take a defensive stance with clenched fists. I could see he was smartly dressed in a dinner suit, and made to look taller than he was by the hat he was wearing. At first I thought he was shuffling along, but now I could see he was moving his legs but getting nowhere, walking on the spot, as if he could go no further forward and stuck in glue. I knew that instant he wasn't the window cleaner, and I began to get slightly nervous. The old hairs on the back of the neck, and that I do not recall any drop in temperature or feeling of impending doom. I then looked at the chimpanzees again, and to my astonishment, they became blurred, then came back into focus. Not as apes, but as deformed, grotesque men, hunchbacked with long arms, diseased, pock-ridden faces, teeth at all angles. They seemed to be snarling, but it could have been through pain, and not at me. Their feet were blurred, but they also appeared to be walking on the spot. They did not seem to be looking at me, almost as if they were intent on moving forward with no eye contact. I was transfixed, couldn't alter my eyes, just staring at them open-mouthed. Somehow out of instinct I reached out and, with a flick of the wrist, shut the kitchen door with a bang. This seemed to stop James's mum in mid-sentence, and while I was panting, trying to get my breath and blurt out what I had seen, she seemed to avoid my eyes and looked elsewhere. I got the distinct feeling she knew what I had seen, but didn't want reminding of it. An awkward moment between for a few seconds then followed, and I looked down at the doorknob, expecting it to start rattling, and even put a flat hand on the door just to make sure it was shut, and to see if I could feel vibrations or any force from the other side of it, but could feel nothing. I, of course, was eager to say, "What the fucking hell was that?" And several times I said, "You're not going to believe what I've just seen, and there's something wrong here, you're not safe," etc., etc. But every time she would reply, "No, you're mistaken. Don't be so foolish." Or, "Come on, Ben, let's not be bothering about that." She just dismissed it. Even though she couldn't see what was there from where she sat, she damn well knew what had come down the long hall. My shoulders shrunk, and I let the tension go, but got the impression from James's mum that no matter what I asked, she wasn't going to give any explanation. This made for an uncomfortable minute or so. Suddenly feeling that I was no longer welcome, I downed the rest of my tea, and I got out of there sharpish after a quick excuse, and indeed went straight to the pub. Trying to get the image of the creatures out of my mind with a lot of unanswered questions, I thought twice about bringing it up with a stranger in the pub. A lone biker in middle-class conservative England was enough to set tongues wagging, and net curtains twitching without any of the locals thinking I was round to twist. The ride home was full of the vision of the man dressed like a gent, on his way to the opera. Thinking back, he was also dressed like a magician, if that is a way you can picture it better. And the two creatures walking but not moving, like there was some force field preventing them from entering the kitchen. No sense of a secret message, no smell, nothing to hear, no real sound. What did it mean? Was I to take it as a warning? The image plagued me for a few days, but after a time, still none the wiser. It came to just mean a curious thing that I kept to myself. After a few months of inquiries, I found James worked abroad in mainland Europe, at months at a time. Through another school friend, I got hold of his email address, and told him of what I'd seen. I got no reply from him. Then, 3 or 4 months later, James got a hold of me via telephone and asked if we could meet. We met at an old pub near the airport he was due to catch a flight from, after coming home for a few days to see his mum. 2 old friends talking over draft, about things we did and fun we had. He gave me a present, an old cricket ball, the very one I bowled him out to win a match back when we were teenagers. Somehow he ended up with it, and always felt I should have it. Then out of the blue, he looked me in the eye and said, "I know what you know, the ghost and that." He went on to explain how the ghost was a common sight when growing up, that it was friendly and never did any harm, how he used to talk to it. He admitted the only time he had felt a bad presence or seen evil-looking things with the ghost was when his dad was still at home and ill, angry, frustrated at his horrible dementia, or days when his own dad didn't even recognize his son, or would turn taps on to fill the kettle, only to forget to turn them off and flood the kitchen and become violent. With hopelessness of it all, I guess. I'm no doctor. He said the ghost, he never gave it a name and was simply known as Ghost when he was a kid, would just stand in the corner of a room and watch most of the time. On the odd occasion would advise James on ways to build model aircraft, or construct Lego brick buildings, etc. Depending on what he was playing with. It was as if he was a teacher, with mortarboard hat and glasses. Another time he recalls helping his gran make some cakes. He said the only reason was to lick the bowl when the cake mix had been transferred to the oven, and the ghost was in the corner with a white apron and flour-covered hands, as if he was a baker. Most times growing up, the ghost adapted its presence to the situation. James felt it did it to make him at ease, to show it was no threat. If he played with cars on the landing after making Lego houses and cardboard streets, all pretending Starsky and Hutch were after some robbers in a high-speed chase, Ghost would be there with him, dressed as a policeman. Or mass games of army with little toy soldiers spread out on his bedroom floor. Ghost would be there, in a British desert rat khaki uniform, or stood to attention, as if outside Buckingham Palace in a smart red tunic and bearskin hat. I was taking all of this with a mix of open-mouthed astonishment and furrow-browed knowing nods. He seemed surprised I had seen it, as no one had ever mentioned it to him before. Ghost could be there in the room at a family gathering or party, and he knew he was the only one who could see him. He asked if I remembered his 10th birthday party. I did, vaguely. 24 kids hyper on sweets and cake, running around his house playing games, music blaring away, his mum with jugs of orange juice ready to fill up paper cups, etc. His dad did a treasure hunt in the garden. One numbered clue gave the location cryptically to the next, each hidden in a different spot, where, when we had deciphered the note, prompted mass running around in search for them. Each stage giving a small chocolate bar and the next clue. One hidden inside a rosebush, the next on the garden wall. You get the idea. James said we all got stuck on number 10, the last clue and biggest prize. His dad sat smug and tight-lipped in a deck chair, thinking he had beaten us all. Then Ghost appeared, dressed like an acrobat or harlequin, standing under the branch of the willow tree they had. The clue and prize was in the bird feeder, hanging from the very branch. James waltzed over and claimed it. To much cheering by us and puzzlement by his dad, who just couldn't understand how James found it so quick. Now, nearly 20 years later, it made sense that a ghost had pointed James to the prize. Although bizarre that I was even contemplating it as a normal event. I certainly couldn't see Ghost back then, and as far as I am aware, neither could any of our classmates. When James's dad got ill and progressively worse, so did Ghost. James was in his early 20s by this time, and had moved out, but on trips back to see his mum and dad, Ghost would usually make one brief appearance, just to let him know he was still about. These amounted to salutes at the end of the sofa, or being addressed as a sailor blowing a pea whistle at the front door as if piping aboard an admiral on deck. Then gradually Ghost would bring friends with him, always smaller and sinister, street urchins in Victorian garb, or puny tramp-like old men on all fours. As his dad's condition worsened, so did the friends Ghost brought along, he said. More and more on visits to see his struggling father and under-pressure mother. The sightings would take a darker turn, with a different look on his face now, not one of fright, more like disappointment, or as if some fact he had tried to keep hidden was suddenly common knowledge. He went through the different guises Ghost's friends appeared in, scantily clad women, whore-like were his words, with yellow teeth and green mold on their breasts, to skeletal beings with flesh hanging off, and rat-like kids with swishing tails and elongated faces smothered in excrement. Eventually his dad's condition got so bad, and the situation too much for his mum, that they moved him into a home where he lived out the final months of his life, attacking the carers, groping the nurses, and spitting on most people who entered his room. Far from the nice man I knew growing up. I'd go so far as to say he wasn't the same man. That is what dementia did to him. No longer the quiet pipe-smoking fellow with a newspaper, always to hand and pencil behind his ear, ready to fill in some of the crossword puzzle when the answer came to him, but a stooped, crooked being who couldn't even recognize his own son, and who would lash out with punches to his wife of 35 years. James had to go to get to his plane. We shook hands, gave a knowing look to each other, that what was said wouldn't go any further. No need for others to think him crazy or to think he wanted sympathy or to be believed. It was a personal thing for him, and I was happy to go along with all of it. James, one last thing. You have to tell me, when was the last time you saw Ghost? He stopped, sighed. Out of frustration or tiredness, I don't know. Let the bags fall to the ground, then just looked at me, with a withered, glassy-eyed expression on his face. He struggled to speak, croaky-voiced, then cleared his throat, and on the verge of crying he came closer and spoke softly. They came and took Dad away early one Sunday morning after a horrid week of abuse to Mum, vile words to myself, and the house smelling of burnt milk and piss when Dad, who had been sedated, got up at 5 a.m. and tried to make some porridge. He forgot about it, and the pan burned dry. Smoke alarms went off, and I rushed out of bed to find him naked, pissing on the television and quietly muttering. I can't remember where the toilet is. It was the final straw. I couldn't leave Mum alone with him. He'd end up blowing the house up after leaving the gas on or something. The medical staff injected him with something or other, and in 30 seconds he was out cold. They strapped him to a wheeled bed and loaded him in an ambulance. Some health worker official came soon after with details and forms and procedure, and that was that. As I closed the front door and the ambulance pulled away, we still felt bad that we had sent him away, and that we were bad people. But it had to be like that, for Mum, for me, for all of it. I know that for certain now. That lasted less than 4 months in the home, but that morning, just as the sun was coming out, with just me and Mum in the kitchen, I looked through the conservatory windows to the garden, and there at the bottom of the garden was Ghost, this time dressed like a Quaker with black gown, grey wig and wide-brimmed hat. He just waved at me and walked behind a tree and vanished. Never seen him since. I half-heartedly waved back and whispered bye-bye. At that, James turned and dashed for his flight. We've not spoken since, and the only contact I've had was an email from overseas from him. It had a smiley face and a picture of a Quaker from a brand of porridge here in the UK. To me that meant James had come to terms with it all, and could even laugh about it now. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Scary Subscriber Stories, episode 52. Big thanks to everybody who sent their stories in for use in this video. Now if you have a story yourself, then please do send it in. You can send it to kingofthecities@gmail.com or Google Mail, whichever you prefer. And if you're not too confident about your writing skills, don't worry about that. Just jot your story down if you'd like it told, and send it along. I don't mind giving it the quick once-over, cleaning up any of the grammar, that sort of thing. It's not an issue. I never change the events or the intent of a story. I simply just kind of reword certain phrases, that's it. I generally find most people, even those who say to me, oh, feel free to change it about, I have to change very little, to be honest with you. But I don't mind doing a quick rewrite if I have to. The only thing I do ask is you have to be at least 16 to submit a story on your own. If you're between the ages of 13 to 15, just get your parent or guardian's permission before you send anything in. Just a quick, would you mind if I did this? Fine, go ahead, I don't care what you do. You know how it goes, that's fine. Just as long as your responsible adult has given the okay. Okay, and with that I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.